Introduction. It was a typical sunny afternoon in Palm Beach, Florida, where the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the distant hum of luxury cars. Donald Trump, the former president and a well-known figure, was enjoying a leisurely drive through his neighborhood. The streets were lined with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze, but beneath this picturesque facade lay stories of struggle and resilience that often went unnoticed. As he navigated through the familiar roads, Trump's mind wandered to the various issues facing the nation: economic disparities, social justice, and the challenges faced by veterans. He had always been vocal about his support for military personnel, but he knew that words were often not enough. There were countless veterans who returned home only to find themselves fighting battles far from the battlefield, battles against unemployment, mental health issues, and societal neglect. Just as he turned onto a quieter street, something caught his eye. A man stood by the roadside, wearing a worn-out jacket adorned with military insignia. His face bore the marks of hardship, deep lines etched by time and struggle. The man was visibly distressed, rummaging through a small backpack as if searching for something important. Trump felt an instinctive pull to stop. He rolled down his window and called out, "Hey there, do you need a ride?" The veteran looked up, surprise flickering across his face. After a brief moment of hesitation, he nodded slowly and approached the car. "Thank you, sir," he said gratefully as he slid into the passenger seat. "I appreciate it." "Not a problem at all," Trump replied with a warm smile. "I'm Donald, by the way." "James," the veteran introduced himself, extending a hand. As they shook hands, Trump felt an unexpected weight in James's grip, a mix of gratitude and unspoken burdens. As they began to drive, Trump noticed that James seemed lost in thought. The silence between them was thick with unexpressed emotions. To break the ice, Trump asked casually about James's military service. "I served in Iraq," James replied after a moment. His voice was steady but laced with an undercurrent of pain. "Came back in one piece, but it hasn't been easy since." Trump nodded, understanding that many veterans faced challenges reintegrating into civilian life. "What do you mean?" he probed gently. James took a deep breath before continuing. "I lost my job after coming back. It's hard to find work when employers see veteran but not qualified. I've been struggling to make ends meet ever since." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Trump felt a pang of empathy. He had heard similar stories before, but hearing them directly from someone sitting next to him made it all too real. "Have you sought help from any organizations?" Trump asked, genuinely curious. "I've tried," James replied with a hint of frustration in his voice. "But it's like running in circles. There are programs out there, but they don't always reach those who need them most." Trump listened intently as James shared his experiences, how he had applied to numerous jobs only to receive rejection after rejection. Each no felt like another reminder of his worthlessness after serving his country. As they drove through the vibrant streets lined with luxury homes and expensive cars, a stark contrast to James's current situation, Trump couldn't help but reflect on how easy it was for people to overlook those who were struggling right under their noses. "Tell me more about your time in Iraq," Trump encouraged, hoping to shift the focus away from painful memories. James's eyes lit up momentarily as he recalled his comrades and shared stories of camaraderie amidst chaos, the bonds formed under fire that transcended race and background. He spoke of bravery and sacrifice, but also of loss, the friends who never made it back home. Listening intently, Trump felt a wave of respect wash over him for this man who had given so much yet felt so little in return from society. The conversation shifted as they discussed life after service, dreams deferred, and hopes that seemed increasingly out of reach. As they approached a stoplight, Trump glanced over at James and saw something that struck him, a flicker of determination behind those weary eyes. It was clear that despite all odds stacked against him, James still held on to hope. "James," Trump said thoughtfully as they waited for the light to change, "what would you want people to know about veterans like yourself?" James paused for a moment before responding. "We're not just statistics or headlines, we're real people with real stories, struggles that don't end when we take off our uniforms." The light turned green, and as Trump pressed on the accelerator, he realized this ride was turning into something far more profound than he had anticipated. A journey not just through Palm Beach, but into the heart of what it meant to be an American veteran facing life's challenges head-on. The veteran's background. As the car glided through the sun-drenched streets of Palm Beach, James gazed out the window, lost in thought. The vibrant colors of the palm trees and the luxury homes seemed to contrast sharply with the reality he faced. Memories flooded back, memories of camaraderie, bravery, and the harsh realities of returning home. "After I got back from Iraq, I thought everything would be fine," James began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I imagined reuniting with my family, finding a good job and living a normal life again, but it didn't turn out that way." Trump listened intently as James recounted his journey. He spoke of the excitement that filled him when he returned home, greeted by friends and family who were proud of his service. There were parades and celebrations, but those moments were fleeting. Reality hit hard when he realized that the world he had left behind had changed while he was away. "I had a job lined up at a construction company," James continued, his brow furrowing. "But when I got there, I found out they had hired someone else while I was deployed. They said it was business as usual, but it felt like a betrayal." James's voice grew more animated as he described the months that followed, endless job applications, interviews that led nowhere, and the mounting frustration of being overlooked. "I have skills," he insisted. "I can lead teams, manage projects, but all they see is a veteran who might be damaged goods." Trump nodded thoughtfully. He had heard similar sentiments from other veterans, but hearing it directly from James made it all the more poignant. "What about support from veteran organizations?" Trump asked, genuinely curious. James let out a bitter laugh. "I tried reaching out to a few organizations that promised to help veterans find jobs. They all seemed great on paper, but in reality, it was like shouting into a void. You fill out forms, attend workshops, and at the end of it all, nothing changes." The frustration in James's voice resonated with Trump. He thought about how many veterans might feel similarly lost and unheard in a system designed to support them, yet often fell short. "Have you ever thought about starting your own business?" Trump asked, intrigued by the idea. "I have," James admitted, his eyes lighting up momentarily. "I've always wanted to start a landscaping company, something that would allow me to work outdoors and be my own boss." He paused for a moment before adding, "But without capital or support, it feels like just another dream slipping away." Trump could sense the weight of hopelessness in James's words. It reminded him of stories he had heard during his presidency, stories of veterans struggling to find their footing after serving their country. "Tell me about your time in Iraq," Trump prompted again, hoping to shift the focus back to something more uplifting. James's expression softened as he recalled his deployment. "I was part of a unit responsible for training local forces," he explained. "We worked alongside brave men and women who were fighting for their country just like we were." He shared stories of late-night patrols under starlit skies and moments of sheer terror when gunfire erupted unexpectedly. Yet amidst the chaos there were also moments of laughter, shared meals with local families who offered hospitality despite their own hardships. There was this one time we were invited to a wedding, James recalled with a smile breaking through his somber demeanor. It was incredible. We danced with locals and celebrated life amidst all the darkness surrounding us. As he spoke, Trump could see how these memories shaped James's identity, how they connected him to something greater than himself. Yet there was also an underlying sadness. Those joyful moments felt worlds away from his current reality. "Do you keep in touch with anyone from your unit?" Trump asked. "Not as much as I'd like," James replied quietly. "Life gets busy for everyone after returning home. But I do have a few close friends who understand what we went through." His eyes darkened slightly as he added, "Some didn't make it back." The weight of loss hung heavily in the air between them. Trump felt an ache in his chest for those who had sacrificed everything, and for those like James who bore the scars of war, both visible and invisible. "Have you sought help for any mental health challenges?" Trump ventured carefully. James hesitated before answering. "I've tried therapy here and there," he admitted reluctantly. "But it's hard to open up about things that haunt you every day." He looked out at the passing scenery as if searching for answers among the palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. "I get that," Trump said softly. "It takes strength to confront those feelings." James nodded slowly, appreciating Trump's understanding tone. "Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying this weight alone," he confessed. "It's hard to explain to people who haven't been through it." As they continued driving through Palm Beach, Trump felt a growing sense of responsibility, a desire to amplify James's voice and share his story with others who might feel similarly isolated. "James," Trump said thoughtfully as they approached another stoplight, "what do you think could make a difference for veterans like yourself?" James pondered for a moment before responding earnestly. "Awareness is key," he said finally. "People need to understand what we go through after serving our country, how difficult it can be to reintegrate into society." Trump nodded in agreement. This was not just about policy or statistics. It was about real people with real stories deserving attention and support. As they waited for the light to change once more, both men sat in thoughtful silence, a moment shared between two individuals from vastly different worlds, but connected by shared humanity and understanding. The ride begins. As the car rolled forward, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over Palm Beach. The streets began to quiet down, and the vibrant energy of the day slowly gave way to a more reflective evening atmosphere. James sat in the passenger seat, still processing his thoughts, as he glanced out at the luxurious homes lining the road. "Where are you headed?" Trump asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "I was just on my way to a local community center," James replied. "They have a program for veterans that I thought I'd check out. It's supposed to help with job placement, but I'm not sure how effective it is." Trump nodded, intrigued. "What kind of support do they offer?" "They have workshops and resume building sessions," James explained. "But honestly, I'm starting to wonder if it's worth my time. I've been through so many programs that promised results but delivered little." Trump could sense the weariness in James's voice. "It sounds frustrating," he said empathetically. "But you're taking steps to improve your situation, and that's commendable." "Thanks," James replied, a hint of gratitude in his tone. "I just wish it didn't feel like such an uphill battle all the time." As they continued driving, Trump decided to share a bit about his own experiences with challenges and setbacks. "You know," he began, "I've faced my fair share of obstacles too, business failures, public scrutiny. It's tough when people only see one side of you." James turned to look at Trump, intrigued by this unexpected revelation. "Really? I always thought you had everything figured out." Trump chuckled lightly. "Not at all. Success often comes with its own set of challenges. People think it's all about winning, but there are moments of doubt and fear behind closed doors." James nodded thoughtfully, realizing that even someone as prominent as Trump had faced struggles. It was a reminder that everyone has their battles, no matter their status or wealth. "Have you ever felt like giving up?" James asked curiously. "Of course," Trump admitted candidly. "But I learned early on that resilience is key. You have to keep pushing forward even when it feels impossible." He paused for a moment before adding, "And sometimes it helps to lean on others for support." James considered this advice as they approached a busy intersection filled with shops and restaurants buzzing with life. The contrast between the lively atmosphere outside and his own internal struggles weighed heavily on him. "Do you have family nearby?" Trump asked, hoping to steer the conversation toward something more personal. "Yeah," James replied with a small smile. "My sister lives not too far from here. She's been my rock through all this." His expression softened as he spoke about her support during his toughest times, how she had encouraged him to keep trying and reminded him of his worth. "That's great to hear," Trump said genuinely. "Family can make a world of difference." As they navigated through traffic, Trump felt compelled to dig deeper into James's story. "What do you miss most about your time in service?" he asked. James paused for a moment before answering, his gaze focused on the passing scenery. "The camaraderie," he said finally. "The brotherhood we shared was unlike anything else. We looked out for each other in ways that went beyond friendship. It was life or death." Trump listened intently as James described the bonds formed during deployment, the late-night conversations under starry skies, shared meals amidst chaos, and the unbreakable trust developed through shared experiences. "It's hard to replicate that kind of connection back home," James continued, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Here, everyone seems so focused on their own lives." "I can understand that," Trump replied thoughtfully. "It's easy to get caught up in our own worlds and forget about those around us." He felt a sense of responsibility growing within him, a desire to bridge this gap between veterans and civilians. "What do you think civilians can do to better support veterans?" Trump asked earnestly. James pondered this question for a moment before responding. "Awareness is crucial," he said firmly. "People need to understand our sacrifices and struggles, not just during service but after we come home." Trump nodded in agreement. He recognized how vital it was for society to acknowledge and appreciate veterans' contributions beyond mere platitudes. As they approached a small park where families were enjoying picnics and children played on swings, James pointed out a group of veterans gathered under a pavilion. "That's where they hold some of the community events," he said. Trump slowed down as they passed by, observing the camaraderie among the group. Laughter echoed through the air as stories were shared over barbecued food and drinks. For a moment, he felt an urge to join them, to connect with those who understood what it meant to serve. "Have you been able to connect with them?" Trump asked. "A little," James admitted hesitantly. "I've gone to a few events here and there, but it can be hard sometimes, feeling like an outsider even among fellow veterans." Trump could sense the vulnerability in James's admission. It was clear that despite being surrounded by people who shared similar experiences, loneliness still lingered. "Maybe it just takes time," Trump suggested gently. "Building connections doesn't happen overnight." James nodded thoughtfully as they continued driving through Palm Beach. The sun was now setting on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a beautiful backdrop for a conversation filled with raw honesty. "Do you ever think about what you want your future to look like?" Trump asked curiously. James looked out at the fading light for a moment, before responding thoughtfully. "I want stability, financial security, and peace of mind." He sighed softly before continuing. "But more than anything, I want purpose again, something meaningful to wake up for every day." Trump felt a deep sense of empathy for James. He understood all too well how vital purpose was in shaping one's identity and happiness. As they approached another stoplight, Trump turned toward James with sincerity in his eyes. "You know what? I believe you can find that purpose again." James met Trump's gaze with surprise. There was something genuine in those words, an acknowledgement of his struggles paired with encouragement for what lay ahead. "Thank you," James replied quietly but earnestly. The light turned green once more as they continued their journey through Palm Beach, a journey filled with unexpected revelations and profound connections between two men from vastly different worlds, yet united by shared humanity. Unexpected revelations. As they drove through the picturesque streets of Palm Beach, the sun continued to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the road. The vibrant colors of the sunset mirrored the emotional landscape unfolding within the car. Trump could sense that their conversation was shifting into deeper territory, one that transcended mere small talk and ventured into personal truths. "James," Trump began, his tone more serious, "what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about veterans?" James took a moment to ponder this question. "I think a lot of people believe that once we come home, everything is fine," he replied thoughtfully. "They think we should just be grateful for our service and move on, but it's not that simple." "Why do you think that is?" Trump asked, genuinely curious. "Because society often romanticizes military service," James explained. "They see the uniform, the medals, and they forget about the human cost. They don't see the struggles we face with PTSD, unemployment, or reintegration into civilian life." Trump nodded slowly, absorbing James's words. He had always been an advocate for veterans, but hearing this perspective from someone who had lived it made him realize how much more there was to understand. "What can be done to change that perception?" Trump asked. "Education is key," James said firmly. "People need to hear our stories, real stories about what we go through after serving. It's not just about parades and thank yous, it's about understanding the complexities of our experiences." As they continued driving, Trump felt a growing sense of responsibility to amplify these voices, the voices of veterans like James, who were often overlooked in discussions about military service. "Have you ever thought about sharing your story publicly?" Trump asked. James hesitated for a moment before answering. "I've thought about it, but it's scary," he admitted. "What if people don't understand? What if they judge me?" Trump leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "You'd be surprised at how many people would resonate with your experiences. Sharing your story could help others feel less alone." James considered this for a moment, weighing the idea in his mind. "Maybe you're right," he said slowly. "But it's hard to open up about things that still hurt." "I get that," Trump replied sympathetically. "But sometimes vulnerability can be a strength. It shows others that they're not alone in their struggles." As they turned onto a quieter street lined with trees, James felt a flicker of hope at Trump's words. Perhaps sharing his story could make a difference, not just for himself, but for others who might be facing similar battles. "Do you think you'd ever want to start a non-profit or something?" Trump asked, intrigued by the possibility. "I've thought about it," James admitted, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "A place where veterans can come together to share their experiences and support one another, maybe even offer job training or mentorship." "That sounds like a fantastic idea," Trump exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "You have the passion and experience to make it happen." James smiled at the encouragement. It felt good to have someone believe in his vision. It would take a lot of work, though, he cautioned. I'd need funding and resources. Trump waved his hand dismissively. We can figure that out later. The important thing is having a vision. He paused for a moment before adding with sincerity, I'd be happy to help however I can. James looked at Trump in disbelief. Here was a man who had held one of the highest offices in the land, offering his support for an idea born from James's own struggles. Thank you, James said quietly, but earnestly. That means a lot. As they continued their journey, Trump felt increasingly inspired by James's resilience and determination. It was clear that this ride was becoming more than just an encounter between two individuals. It was evolving into something transformative. Tell me more about what you envision for this non-profit, Trump encouraged. James took a deep breath as he began to articulate his ideas more clearly. I want it to be a safe space where veterans can come together without judgment, share their stories, their struggles, and find camaraderie again. He paused thoughtfully before continuing. We could host workshops on mental health awareness, job skills training, even creative outlets like art or music therapy. That sounds incredible, Trump said enthusiastically. You're tapping into something powerful, a way for veterans to reclaim their sense of purpose and community. As they approached another stoplight, James felt a surge of excitement at the possibilities ahead. For so long, he had felt trapped in his circumstances, but now there was a glimmer of hope, a vision that could lead him towards something meaningful. What do you think would be the biggest challenge in starting this non-profit? Trump asked. Funding is definitely one hurdle, James admitted candidly, but I also worry about reaching veterans who are isolated or reluctant to seek help. Maybe we could partner with local businesses or organizations that support veterans, Trump suggested thoughtfully. You'd be surprised at how many people want to contribute once they hear your story. James nodded appreciatively. He hadn't considered that angle before. The idea of building partnerships within the community felt like an achievable step forward. As they continued their conversation about potential strategies and outreach efforts, both men became increasingly animated, sharing ideas back and forth as if brainstorming for something monumental. Suddenly, as they turned onto a street lined with small shops and cafes, bustling with patrons enjoying their evening out, James spotted something familiar, a small diner where he used to go with friends during happier times. "Stop there!" he exclaimed suddenly. Trump pulled over to the curb as James pointed excitedly at the diner's neon sign, flickering brightly against the twilight sky. "I used to come here all the time," James said with nostalgia evident in his voice. "It feels like ages since I've been back." Trump smiled at James's enthusiasm. It was refreshing to see him light up after discussing such heavy topics moments ago. "Let's grab some food," Trump suggested impulsively as he parked the car. James hesitated for just a moment before nodding eagerly. Perhaps this spontaneous detour could serve as a reminder of brighter days, a chance to reconnect with simpler pleasures amidst life's challenges. As they entered the diner together, the smell of fresh coffee and grilled burgers wafting through the air, Trump couldn't help but feel grateful for this unexpected journey they had embarked upon together. Sitting down at a booth near the window, both men ordered their meals while continuing their conversation about dreams and aspirations, each bite punctuating their shared laughter and camaraderie. In that moment, a former president and a struggling veteran, two men from vastly different backgrounds, found common ground over burgers and fries while forging an unlikely bond rooted in understanding and empathy. Conclusion and reflection. As they settled into their booth at the diner, the atmosphere buzzed with life. The sounds of clinking silverware, laughter, and the sizzling of burgers on the grill created a warm backdrop for their conversation. Trump and James shared stories over their meals, each bite accompanied by laughter and a growing sense of camaraderie. "So what's your favorite thing on the menu?" Trump asked, glancing at the diner's classic offerings. James chuckled. "You can't go wrong with a cheeseburger and fries. It's comfort food at its finest." He paused for a moment, looking around at the familiar surroundings. "I used to come here with my buddies after long shifts. We'd share stories, talk about life. It felt like home." Trump nodded, appreciating the sentiment. There's something special about places like this, where memories are made over good food and great company. As they enjoyed their meals, James felt a sense of ease he hadn't experienced in a long time. The weight of his struggles seemed lighter in this moment, surrounded by laughter and shared experiences. He found himself opening up more about his dreams for the future, the non-profit he envisioned, the community he wanted to build. "Do you really think it's possible?" James asked, looking directly at Trump. "To create a space where veterans can come together and support one another?" "Absolutely," Trump replied without hesitation. "You have the passion and vision. It just takes determination to make it happen." He leaned forward slightly, his tone earnest. "And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there who want to help." James felt a surge of hope at Trump's words. For so long, he had felt isolated in his struggles, but now he realized that there was a path forward, one that could lead him to purpose and fulfillment. After finishing their meals, they lingered at the table, savoring the moment. The diner was filled with patrons enjoying their evenings, but for James and Trump, this was more than just a meal. It was a pivotal moment in their lives. "Can I ask you something personal?" James ventured cautiously. "Of course," Trump replied, intrigued. "What does it feel like to be in your position, to have so much influence over people's lives?" Trump paused for a moment, contemplating the question. "It's both a privilege and a heavy responsibility," he admitted. "I've always believed in using my platform to advocate for those who don't have a voice, whether it's veterans or anyone else facing challenges." James nodded thoughtfully. He could see how deeply Trump cared about making a difference. "It must be tough sometimes," he said quietly. "It is," Trump agreed. "But moments like this, conversations like ours, remind me why it matters. Every person has a story worth telling. Every struggle deserves attention." As they prepared to leave the diner, James felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over him. This unexpected encounter had sparked something within him, a renewed sense of purpose and determination to pursue his dreams. "Thank you for today," James said sincerely as they stepped outside into the cool evening air. "I didn't expect any of this when I got that ride." Trump smiled warmly. "Neither did I, but sometimes life surprises us in the best ways." He paused for a moment before adding, "Remember, you have what it takes to create change." As they walked back to the car, James couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in just a few hours. What began as an ordinary ride had transformed into an extraordinary journey of self-discovery and connection. Once inside the car, Trump turned to James with genuine curiosity. "What's your next step now that you have this vision?" James took a deep breath as he considered his answer. "I think I need to start by reaching out to other veterans, finding out what they need and how I can help." He felt energized by the thought of taking action rather than waiting for opportunities to come to him. "That sounds like an excellent plan," Trump encouraged, "and don't hesitate to reach out if you need support along the way." As they drove through the quiet streets illuminated by streetlights, James felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him, a feeling that had been absent for far too long. "Can I ask you one last thing?" James said as they neared his destination. "Anything," Trump replied. "What do you think is the most important lesson you've learned from your experiences?" Trump thought carefully before answering. I've learned that resilience is key, both in business and in life. It's about getting back up when you're knocked down and finding strength in vulnerability. He looked over at James with sincerity. And never underestimate the power of connection. We're all stronger together. James absorbed these words deeply. They resonated with him on multiple levels, both as a veteran facing challenges and as someone seeking purpose in his life. As they arrived at James's destination, a modest community center where veterans gathered, he turned to Trump with gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for everything today," he said earnestly. "You've given me hope." Trump smiled back warmly. "You've given me hope too, James. Your story matters. Don't ever forget that." With that final exchange hanging in the air between them, a promise of support and understanding, they parted ways under the night sky, filled with stars. As James walked toward the community center, he felt lighter than he had in years. A weight lifted off his shoulders as he embraced this newfound purpose within himself. Inside the center, familiar faces greeted him with smiles. He could hear laughter echoing through the halls as veterans gathered for another evening of camaraderie and support. In that moment, James knew he was not alone anymore. He was part of something bigger, a community that understood him and shared his struggles. And as he stepped into that welcoming space filled with warmth and understanding, he realized that this was just the beginning of his journey, a journey toward healing, connection, and ultimately creating change for himself and others like him.